Through antiquity, much of the myth and religion are built on a template that has been referred to as a monomyth. The monomyth itself is not complete. I started a video series last month, and I put up the first in the series where I look at myth and religions and see this conceptual step. That one was called the cyclical pain. That's the reason we would go on an inner healing path. And this video is going to be about another step, about the calling, how we see that between, well, myth and religions. If there's a story that starts with the hero in the beginning, that hero has to be called. And we can identify what that is. And I'm going to be making those comparisons in this video on the calling. I'll post a link below to the one with the cyclical pain. And my name is Dan Paulson. Let's go ahead and get started. Now, the first thing I want to say to you is that there's a certain technique used to read these, and it's a conceptual process. The reason we look at these stories and say, yeah, they're all different, I don't know what you're talking about, is because we don't know how to read the concepts in them. Many times people just read them at face value. There is a certain technique that if you use it on every myth and every religion, the exact same process, you will find that they are all framed on one template. The process is that story plays out in the psyche. In fact, there's a point where I can show where that happens. If we were to follow the book of Exodus, I would suggest this is playing out in my mind as I'm off someplace on my own, that I am Moses and that I am looking for a new life. There's a point in time where I go through the Red Sea, and this is the big adventure. I barely make it. Pharaoh's chasing it. People are coming. We're all running through, and Pharaoh is wanting to come after us, and the chariots are coming out, and yeah, you know the story. All that happens. Then if you went to the Argonautica from Greek myth, Jason and the Argonauts and the Symplegades, the clashing rocks, there's a point where they have to go through and they barely make it. They're getting aid. In Moses' case, he gets aid from God. Here we have aid from Hera, helping, observing, watching, getting them through. They barely make it. Same sort of thing, that the ship is almost crushed and gone. And you look at those and go, are those different? Super early in history, some of the earliest. I'm going to pull from Joseph Campbell's book, The Hero with 1,000 Faces. This goes back to Mesopotamia from a Sumerian king, Gilgamesh. The woman instructed him to seek the ferryman, whom he found chopping wood in the forest and guarded by a group of attendants. Gilgamesh shattered these attendants, and the ferryman consented to convey him across the waters of death. It was a voyage of 1.5 months. The passenger was warned to not touch the waters. So there's other things going on right there, but we have that in the beginning, the crossing of this threshold. But what's the same about them? What in there makes them the same story? And that's where we look at them and say they're concepts. They're not real. They mean something inside my psyche. They're holding a message for me. And that's the crossing of a threshold. That's a difficult threshold to cross. This is leaving the past behind and moving to a new place, turning inward, though, to where all of our life experience resides, which creates the nature of our life. So when we start interpreting them and realizing that they're holding an inner pathway to self-healing and begin to read them that way, whether they were intended to or not, I believe they were, because they continue to do that same thing. Now, those two crossing of the threshold were easy to see. They are hidden in different ways. Sometimes they're pretty plain language. If we read through Greek stuff, we're not going to see it nested too deep. If we get into a religion like Abrahamic religions, we're going to see this becoming nested very deep. It's not going to become obvious. It's going to be harder to see, and they've got it hidden a layer or two deep in a numbering system, which is, we'll just get to there. It's difficult. This is going to make it easier for people to see the steps in the template, though. And let me talk about the template real quick. This is what I have. If you're familiar with Joseph Campbell's The Hero of 1,000 Faces and the 17-step process right there, we do know that this is an inner path. You can look at this and there's the call to adventure. That's what we're going to be talking about in this one right here. The refusal of the call, supernatural aid. There's that crossing of the first threshold. So what I'm going to suggest that these are all steps that need to be changed into something more interactive. If this is about the trip through the psyche, we don't have to have things like supernatural aid, belly of the whale, meeting with the goddess. If those are mentally interactive steps, then what do they mean? Crossing the threshold, turning inward. Belly of the whale, I'm in my mind. road of trials, I must now start facing my issues. Meeting with the goddess, that is my conscious and my subconscious, which is containing everything, trying to recombine so that I don't have inner parts of me acting out. And it's going to go on that way. I'm going to change these into something that we can look at and go, oh, I get that. I can do something with it. Then when I find that step in the story, I know what it's actually holding. That when I cross a river, I'm not crossing a threshold. That when I cross a river, I'm turning into my mind. That's how we need to understand these. I'll post a link below to the previous video, which is going to cover some of this stuff. I'm just going to let you know this is my template. It's not the Joseph Campbell. I've got a lot more details here. And this first part here, this whole first page, he didn't get any of that. But in fairness, this part is incredibly rare. What he saw, the monomyth, occurs over and over and over. It is just absolutely all over the place. This is creation. The monomyth is how we go and heal. Creation is how we come about. That only happens one time. So that's a harder template to see. This is what he got right here. The selected person, the calling right there. Then he didn't get cause and effect or cycles of pain. Time to begin the inward journey, calling. The refusal of the call, won't want to, needs the awareness of what to do in the mind first. He called that supernatural aid. Struggle to leave the past behind. He did not see that. Turns inward to the mind. He saw that. That's crossing the threshold. Okay, so this is what we're going to be doing. What I covered before was this cycles of pain, and what I want to do now is cover the selected person. And what I'd like you to bear in mind as we go, these steps are generally considered the steps of a human's life, from the time you're born to the time you start having experiences, how we become divided, how life goes on. All of that is stepped in there sequentially. And the stories are going to be following this pattern. There's going to be a called person. There's going to be cycles of pain. There's going to be a struggle to leave the past, no matter whose story you're reading it from, whether it's Greek myth or whether it's Abram and Sarai in Genesis. We're going to have those issues come up. They're going to be conceptual. We'll have to look for them in that way. Okay. What I want to do here is there was two of them in the beginning there. There was the calling, but then there was also an isolation. There's a selection before that. I want to cover both of them. Joseph Campbell covered a calling. That was it. What he didn't cover was that there's a special selection process early on that makes it so this is very limited in who's going to do it. There's not very many people that are going to take this path. So in this video, the ultimate goal is to cover actually those two up there. That is the calling and the pre-selection. The calling is one that is going to be very common. Every story that is a monomyth is going to have a calling. The pre-selection up here is the one that I want to make sure that we cover as well. The selected person there, that is where the isolation comes in. In a calling, if you get down here, that just means anybody who wants to can answer the call. But they've got nested in there that, yeah, there's going to be very few people that do it. And it will be very evident when you see it and hear it, what it sounds like. Okay, now the called person. This is very critical. You are the called person if you decide to turn inward. This is that story. Everybody has two lives. And the second one begins the moment you realize, I've only got one life. We get to a point, some people get to a point where they go, wow, something has gone completely wrong. I see what happened. I've emerged through life without knowing it. Unaware, I become a product of my experiences, and it's not okay. And I want to extract myself from it. I've got hurt, I got pain, I got bad relationships, I got all kinds of things going on, and I know that it's from the way I'm holding things in my mind. It's a perception. Then the person, that's what this template is for. It's steps to turn inward. That crossing of the threshold is right here. Inside the mind is where we are, what he would call the belly of the whale. Well, because that's where Jonah was, right? But we're in our minds is what that is. You know what? It's unusual to me that he picked that example. If you were following a monomyth in Exodus, right after crossing the threshold, you're in the desert for 40 years. That's the belly of the whale. You're in a devoid place. You need to clear it out. Jesus, 40 days in the desert. So belly of the whale is you see how the analogs are being used to sound different, yet still carry the same idea. It's up here, and we're just giving it whatever you want to call it. It's a place to be. We're facing our issues that we don't want to face. We're looking at the things that we're too afraid of. The isolation starts right away. Okay, so at any time that you're on a monomyth, you can read it just as an adventure or a religion. Or you could say, oh, I get it. I am Jason. I am Marduk. I am Abram. I am Noah. And that is my consciousness. God that I'm dealing with is my higher self. My wife, who I want to gain as my wife is my inner being that I've lost touch with through life. My happiness, my good qualities, all of that. I want to reattach with that. It's just hard to get this verbiage dialed in. What it is your inner self. It's being referred to in a mental hierarchy with, they're looking in their culture going, the man is in charge of the wife. So you turn it inward and go, the conscious is in charge of the subconscious. So we're going to call this the man. We're going to call this the wife. There's a hierarchy happening right there that is actually what we're really working with. That inner self is not a wife. It's not female. It's non-gender at all. It's where you store your energy. It is where you store the memories and the emotions that become what you live through until you understand that. And all of the things that I'm hurt with are, monsters, bad offspring, something like that. There's something else that's going on that's a negative thing inside of us that represents the memories and the perceptions of them that continue to act out. So that's it. We're going to become the called person then. That's why it becomes critical. Look at this story that we're going to look at here, Marduk. Can you put yourself in a position where you're like, okay, I don't know if you know this story. Tiamat is the earlier self, the early female that took over and went out of control. That represents our early self, our early inner being that got corrupted with things and now it's out of control. We want to wipe it out. Marduk becomes our new self that's like, okay, that's it. I'm going back and resolving this stuff. Tiamat and all of you, this represents myself, the gods, the things that were created at one point in time to help out. This is just learning life. They have become so bad that we want to get rid of them. This is getting rid of our inner self. This is important if you don't follow my work. Everything that we're talking about is conceptual ideas. Early gods does not mean early gods. This is why people that read these literally go, that is so different from Genesis. No, there's no possible way. They're conceptual. Okay, the early gods represent the early characteristics that you've taken on in life. And why are they gods? Because when they act out, they take over. You don't have control over them. They are gods that need to be destroyed and replaced by humans that are subservient to life. That means all the times I'm acting out, freaking out, getting triggered, that stuff has to be replaced by something that goes, whew, you know what? I resolved that. I'm good. Okay. If we went to Genesis, what would we find? Do we find gods that need to be destroyed? No, what we find is that the early pure daughters of men have been corrupted by the sons of God and now must be destroyed. They sound different until you understand they're conceptually the same thing. They represent our early qualities that have been corrupted because of life experiences that now have to be wiped out. Think about it. You have early qualities that were fine and they were pure and they were beautiful. Then they get corrupted by life experiences that is gone into by the sons of God. They've been overpowered by something. Then what happens is that as a result, they produce offspring that are the Nephilim. This is the punishment of Eve. You're going to give pain in childbirth. You're going to have monsters in childbirth for having this. It's another version of the same thing. What are the Nephilim? When we get triggered, when we act out, when we have to go, I'm sorry I did that, I apologize. I don't know why I do that. People do that all the time without ever questioning themselves. The selective person is going to be the one that goes, God, what is the matter with me? What is inside of me that takes over? We're going to go after those. Those are the Nephilim. Okay, I'm hoping I've set that up enough. We're looking to identify how to spot a called person. So here we have, this is in the Enuma Elish on tablet 1. This is very early into it. There's all of the bad stuff has been established. It's too crazy. And now they're talking about going and wiping out all of that stuff. But Tiamat, the earlier self, is saying, no, we can't. This represents that idea that we're struggling with ourselves. Okay. And then this starts right here. I'm picking up right here where Marduk shows up. Then the Lord came, who among all was the most judicious. There, within the watery Apsu, did Marduk take his shape. That is us emerging from the watery our inner being. Within the unsullied waters, our pure self, of the Apsu. The Apsu is the place where all the gods hang out. That's our mind. This is our place. The unsullied waters of the mind was Marduk born. This is us. Yeah, that's it. I am finished. I'm going in and I'm not giving up anymore. This is Marduk. Marduk has got to do that job. This is me. This is you when we say I've had it. Okay, so think about that. When I said earlier that there's that point that some of us get to where you go, oh my gosh, I've only got one life. I want to change what's going on. That's what's emerging right here. This is our Marduk emerging at that moment. Okay. From his father Ea, his mother Damkina gave birth to him. He was suckled on the milk of the goddess's own breasts, and she who breastfed him embodied him with excellence. So now we're going to go into a developmental stage. They're going to explain something about Marduk. So that he had a lofty stature. Remembering now, this is you, your conscious self. This is you if it fits with you. So that he had a lofty stature. And that's not physical, that's spiritual. I should shut up and read it. We'll talk about it in the end. So that the look of his eyes was intense, mature from the very first, and mighty, even at a young age. When his grandfather Anu looked upon him, he was glad. His face shone greatly. His heart was exceedingly pleased. So this is another part of us that wants to live our life, that is looking at now a Marduk, a portion of us that is going to be working to take care of the past, and we're pleased with ourselves. So perfect that his head was twice as lofty as any other god. Okay, twice as lofty as any other god, rising high above them. He was the better by every measure. Both his arms and legs were well formed beyond comparison, so that it could not be fathomed, almost incomprehensible. Moreover, he possessed 4 ears to hear and 4 eyes to see, and red flames leapt forth whenever he opened his mouth. His 4 ears were also considerable, of voluminous size, as were his eyes, which were capable of perceiving anything. Being unsurpassed among the gods of exceptional build, having limbs which were mighty and a body terrifically tall. When Anu cried, Mariutu, my son, you are king of the gods, dressed in a shining robe fit for 10 gods, rising beyond him. There were 5 almighty beams which surmounted his head, and Anu invented the 4 winds, and then fashioned them. These he set in Marduk's hands, saying, Free them, my son. Then he formed dust and caused the tornado to bear it away. Then he invented the tidal swell, which aggravated Tiamat. See, they're getting Tiamat's right there with us, inside of us too. We're getting agitated internally by our own self. I'm going to stop there because they're going on with the story. What we did up here, though, do you see there's a couple of things? He's big, tall, something like that. Remembering this is you, your conscious. It's not he, it's not she. It's the conscious of any individual, and it's just being held this way. That there is... What do we have here? There's a point where you have to know this for yourself from experience, and this is where it's going to go off the rails for some people. If you're this person, you know that it's probably a brain type, a personality type, that there's somehow something in introverted sensors, feelers that kind of outside the group that have a bigger scope of what's going on. We see more of what's happening. That I believe that is what they're looking at here, that people have got, we evolved really with a different kind of mind. Imagine all brains being the same. The evolution in a group would be more difficult. If there's different brain types, different personalities, then this ceases to become a bunch of individuals and starts to become a single unit, a single organism working together. So you're going to have your alphas, your betas, you're going to have people that are hunters and foragers, people optimized for various things. But you're also going to have people that go, I can't stand it, it's too crazy in there, I'm going to stand out here. And what do? You're the first line of defense, but you're also the closest food to the lion sneaking up on the group. You're going to be hyper vigilant. So we would evolve being hypervigilant, looking around, being sensitive, being able to feel things, being able to give orders and say, "Lion, get now." I mean, there's something different in certain brains that has to be there to begin with. And that's what I see happening as this is unfolding and describing what that is. This is tough to say. So the chosen one is who? The one that goes, oh, it's a template. It's a self-healing template. I see what's going on here. I'm taking this path. So we begin to see that you just look at it and go, yeah, there's not many people doing that or that's going to or that can even imagine it. So you realize right off the bat, you've hit a severe, this is a filter, a big filter right here. And remember here, and I apologize I'm going on about it, but it's very important. I'm not talking about the calling here. I'm talking about that preliminary setup in the beginning where somehow the individual is singled out. And we're going to see that emerge in the stories, in the examples I have up right up ahead. Okay, I want to move on from here, but I wanted to cover this because it's so early, it's so preliminary, it's setting it up. In this case, it looks a little bit different. It's not going to look exactly the same, but it is definitely setting it up, and it's showing the component parts that are there that later on are going to be further developed and further refined as the religions and mythologies coming about in another 500 to 1,000, 2,000 years are going to continue to improve throughout the culture. But where Marduk is picked up right here in the first tablet is not right in the beginning. It's a little ways into it after everything begins. If you were to compare that side by side with Genesis, what you would see is creation all the way up to where Noah begins. That's what happens in here. There's creation that happens all the way up to Marduk. So what we just did here was the equivalent of jumping right to Noah and skipping creation. Just because he's the called person. Before then, there isn't a calling. The other thing, however, that is very important there, this is a very rare thing, is they were talking about the person, the bigger ears, the bigger eyes, doubled up on things, the capacity to do things. And if you look at that, if you have bigger eyes, what does that mean? You can see more. If you have bigger ears, you can hear better. This just means a perception that is larger. And you know if you're that kind of a person, you just have a bigger spatial awareness than other people. If you know what I'm talking about, you get it. If not, you're probably wondering what the hell's he talking about. You probably don't have that. You're not in that small group. Okay, but this is giving some details. Later on, they're just going to have some isolation. That is until we get to the Jesus Christian version monomyth. Then we're going to see some details come in again. Very light, but we'll get there in this video. But first, let's go to Exodus and Moses. Okay, we start with Exodus. I'm using the updated edition of the NRSV for right now. And right up front, what we have right here is the issue begins where then Pharaoh commanded all his people, every son that is born to the Hebrews, you shall throw him into the Nile, but you shall let every daughter live. Okay, so Pharaoh has declared that all of the Hebrew boys should be killed. But what happens? He's put in a basket, a raft. He's saved out. So he's isolated at birth. He grows up. We're just going to cover that part of it right there. That's not the calling. There's a very specific calling that happens. It's on Mount Horeb. Let's go look at that. Okay, you can see that it's not very far along. It's going to be pretty early in the story where this happens. Moses at the burning bush is what it's called. What we have here is that he led his flock beyond the wilderness and came to Mount Horeb. So he's going to an elevated place, the mountain of God. And God tells him to take his shoes off. He's on hallowed ground. At some point, let me find it here. As Moses is at the burning bush, a couple of things happen. One of them including is God tells Moses that he's chosen to become the leader of the Israelites. And what does Moses say? But Moses said to the Lord, "O my Lord, I have never been eloquent, neither in the past nor even now that you have spoken to your servant, but I am slow of speech and slow of tongue." Then the Lord said to him, "Who gives speech to mortals?" Okay, I won't keep reading that. There's no reason for it. What that was the call and the denial. God says, "You're the man." And he's like, "I can't even talk right." So there was a call and a denial. But early on, we saw that isolation happen there. I'm not going to pull up a lot of information on all of these. Muhammad was 40 years old when he went into the cave and met with God to get the Quran and told God, "I can't talk right and I can't read." So we almost have a replication of the Moses story right there. The cave itself was on a mountain, which indicates an elevated spot. Inside of, goes into the mind, talks to God, the higher self, 40 years old, pure state from the list, and call and denial right there. Now, what I'm going to suggest is that there is always a call. There is always a call, but there isn't always a denial. Sometimes the hero just says, "Yep, I'm going." They're busting through. They don't have any reservations about it. So, if you were to look at, like Luke Skywalker in the beginning of Star Wars, when Uncle Owen tells him he can't go, he wants to go fight the war, but he's like, "No, we need you here for the harvest. You can't go." So Luke has been called. He got the message. He wants to go. It's written in there that the denial is such that he can't make it. He can't go. He wants to. He doesn't deny it, but he's denied the opportunity. It works out that he can go anyway. So that always happens in some manner. They're still going to get over it and go on the adventure. I just wanted to say that. Sometimes the hero is just, they go for it without denying it. What I'll suggest, this is just a part of the story, though, that is not always important. But if you look at it in your own life, what we're doing is we're going on this adventure to turn inward to heal things. We have pain. We have shame. We've been molested, raped. We've done things to people. We have guilt. We have shame. We have all kinds of things that we need to deal with in order to change our life. We're not going to want to do it. We might get to the point where you go, "Oh my God, I've got to do this, but I don't want to." That's the calling and the denial in real life. All right, everyone, this is thick. I'm sorry it takes so long to set up. I'm going to jump right into something. I'm going to modify some things here, and I'm just going to jump into some things that I have available. I'm going to do a Jason and the Argonauts. There were different variations from history. This one is an excerpt that comes from the Annette Giesecke Classical Mythology A to Z book, encyclopedia. Jason, the hero. Jason's father was Aeson. He was King Critias, son of king from Thessaly. He should have become the king of Iolcos. Jason was supposed to become the king of Iolcos, but Aeson's, his father's half-brother, Pelias, seized the throne instead. Now, what I got to say here is that the throne means who rules. The throne is, the land is your life experience, and who's in charge of it. Are you in charge of it, or is another part of you in charge of it? Pelias represents the old self that is in charge. Jason represents, like Marduk, the one that's like going to go take care of it and get this land back. I need to go take care of my business. Okay, so that's how this is getting set up. Aeson's half-brother Pelias. So that means that as life went on and divisions go on, we keep losing control and losing control of our lives, losing the throne, or we're always working to achieve it. In fear for Jason, his newborn son, Aeson made it known that the infant was dead. So right there, he just protected him. He's dead. You can't get him. Pelias wanted to kill Jason, and in secret brought him to the centaur Chiron to be raised. Now, in this part of the centaurs had various roles in Greek mythology, but in this case, he's teaching young people the ways of life, the arts and magic and all of that. So right here we have Jason being saved out at birth and going to Chiron, to his land, to receive his supernatural aid. I forgot to mention, while Moses was on Mount Horeb, he got the staff. He got his magical aid up on top of Mount Horeb when he was doing his, the calling and the denial was going on, while in that story he had been saved early at birth. Later on, it's unfolding. When Jason was of age, he set out to claim the throne of Iolcos. So there's this right here. This is it. This is Marduk being sent back in. This is Jason of age, now being set to go claim the throne of Iolcos. On the way, he came to a raging river where he found an old woman who wished to cross but lacked the strength. So and he's going to go across, lose a sandal, be on hallowed ground. We've got a similar thing right there with barefooted on hallowed ground. In this case, crossing a river. There's going to be a couple of thresholds in here. That's important to note. We talk about a threshold a lot, but there's actually 2 thresholds in much material, and we can see those in place. You can turn inward and You can play with your memories all day long. Now, there's a place in there where there are memories you don't want to go into. That is the second threshold. The first one is simple. Turn inward and go, yeah, I got this, I got that, I did this, I did that, all these things. But there's a place in there that I don't go after. Okay, that's where the Red Sea is. That's where the clashing rocks are. That's where something bigger is going on. That's different. Okay, so right now, are we seeing the calling? If you go through Greek myth, that's the way it is. So you're going to see somebody somehow that is not always isolated out. And you see right here that there was not a refusal, that there was a go ahead and go. It's being written a little bit differently. It's an adventure. But Greek myth is kind of like a big network in many cases. Like stories can lead off of a hero from one place that dips out of a story, reappears on another story somewhere else. So if you're really into Greek myth, you can see that going on. I'm not so much into it. Okay, let's grab another example here. If we jump to Indian material, the Bhagavad Gita. Do you know that one? This is called The War Within. There's a part right here, and I'm going to read some kind of setup. It's very huge, so I'm going to just kind of try to condense some things here. There's a point where what we have is this, it's a land called Kurus. And just to set it up here, there's Arjuna is our hero. That's the called person. And he's going to be tasked to go to battle. There's a land that he and his family own together. His other family was allowed to use it for a period of time, then they're supposed to give it back. This represents the idea that there's an earlier self that's going to be there for a period of time, and then they're supposed to give it up. However, when it's time for them to give it up, they don't give it up. And so Arjuna is tasked to have to go do battle with this family and destroy them in order to get the land back. Does that sound like the Argonautica where Jason has to go take care of Pelias to get his land back, to get control of things? It's very similar. But the battle of the Bhagavad Gita is not Krishna's fight. Krishna is the God, the higher self, the driver of the chariot. The chariot is the self. Who is it that's going to drive? And who is it, the consciousness that's in there that has to do the work? Listen to this. The battle of the Bhagavad Gita is not Krishna's fight, however. It is Arjuna's. So it's not the fight of the higher self, it's the fight of the consciousness. Krishna is only Arjuna's charioteer and advisor. He has promised Arjuna that he will be with him throughout the ordeal, but as much as he passionately hopes for Arjuna's victory, he has sworn to be a non-combatant in the struggle. All right, this squares with the teaching of other material in its own analogous manner. The higher self understands what's going on and is detached from it. It can look at things. However, it is the consciousness that judges everything, and after it's judged, it also continues to re-experience it. The conscious is what feels the glands, the emotions, the conflict, all of that kind of stuff. So in order for a healing to happen, the higher self, the Krishna, the God, whatever the case may be, is there. However, it's up to the consciousness, the called person, to actually do the work. And that is because healing happens by changing the perception. And the only way to change the perception is to surface things and look at them until they cease to hurt, to figure out some way to do that. And that's only done with conscious thinking. Okay, so what goes on is Arjuna, they're driving up and down between the two armies. Oh, Krishna, drive my chariot between the two armies. I want to see those who desire to fight with me. With whom will this battle be fought? I want to see those assembled to fight. So this represents the idea that you're facing yourself. What have I got? Boy, I got these habits. I got this problem. I got these issues. I got those issues. I got this unresolved. I got all these things that I have to destroy, but I don't want to destroy them because it's so hard. It's a lot of work. I'm going to skip ahead right here to the end of Chapter 1, which, remember, is called The War Within. Overwhelmed by sorrow, Arjuna spoke these words, and casting away his bow and arrows, he sat down in his chariot in the middle of the battlefield. So there's the calling, observing what to do, the understanding of it all, going up and down the threshold but not crossing it. The refusal of the call right there. Chapter 2 gets into self-realization. Good stuff. Okay, That's a called person right there, going through the process of going back. They're getting tasked to go back and recover what's theirs in this case. There's going to be different styles. Let's jump into Jewish material. It takes a big change. I'm going to suggest something to you as we look into this. Anytime you get a story, anytime we're bringing on Job, Jacob, Isaac, Abraham, any of these characters as they come along, they're going to be called on the monomyth. What they're going to be is an iteration of ourself. But they're going to be using terms like righteous and covenant, people that have a covenant with God or people that are righteous before God. And I'm going to post a link to my other work, but in Jewish material, it gets very thick. They're hiding this template in a numbering system with dates and quantities of animals and a variety of other things. It is in Genesis where they are developing this numbering system. And again, I'll post a link to a video below to that. The day 3 and 7 is what starts it all. But at some point, right after Noah, who is righteous, right after the flood, God creates a covenant with him, and covenant is said in a short period of time 7 times. And since 7 is 3 as an origin, the way they're encoding their verbal material is exactly that way. If you want to make a word somewhere else mean the same thing as that 7, so that doesn't sound like you're repeating it, say it 7 times in a sentence. It should sound funny when you read it. It should sound like, boy, they repeated that a lot right there. Those are the clues. That's why it's difficult when people do interpretations and they try to straighten things out. But that was said too many times. It doesn't. I can clean that up. Leave it alone. There's a reason it's said that many times. When we get down into Sodom and Gomorrah, there's another analog development right there. And what happens when Abraham starts asking God about Sodom and the destruction of it? He says righteous 7 times. So right there, the term righteous became an analog for that same 7-3 pure state point. So now as we're going through and reading the Bible and seeing things like that, that is always going to refer to that point. But also, like in other material, there's a male call that has an adventure. Let's take a look at something here. First of all, I'm going to go to this list right here. This is what I have as a collection of analogs so far. This is the 7-3 tie point. This is a pure state developed at the end of the 7-day creation story. This is before the second creation story and before first sin. So 7-3 represents that point when we're naked, unashamed in the garden. We're happy. That's a point in time in our life where we are not attached to life experiences. We're just happy, pure selves. That's what we're starting from. That's 7-3 right there. Then as we develop these other numbers, as we get down into, like, for example, where I mentioned just a moment ago about the Sodom farm, 50 is said 4 times, 40 is said 30, 20, 10. There are numbers that occur with that I think, well, they continue to show up all over the place as well. I'm going to call them analogs, and sure enough, I find places where they cross-reference, and that, again, other videos, just to move on from here. Now, I go on to Job, taking those same numbers in a completely different book, and I think, well, Job must be a called person because it's a story about him. Let's see what's going on here. I'm going to do righteous. There's upright. Interesting. I haven't heard that one before. Let me try that. Upright. Oh, look at that. That's said 10 times, and 10 times is one of the analogs. So upright now becomes that same point. The man that was blameless and upright. There we go. Righteous and 7-3 point. Who feared God. You connect with your higher self and turned away from evil to good. There were born to him 7 sons, 7 and 3. See the 7s and the 3s right there? The 7 represents that same pure point, and son, male, daughter, female. This would be like Adam and Eve if we interpret it. 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels. 7s, 3s, 5s. These are all good things to start with, and these are analogs. The sheep, the camels, the yoke of oxen, donkeys, are all things that we have, the very many servants. These are all representing qualities that we have inside that are pure. These are not real life things. They're all analogous terms. So that this man was the greatest of all the people of the East. So East is a good place. Okay. His sons used to go and hold feasts in one another's houses in turn, and they would send and invite their 3 sisters to eat and drink with them. And when the feast days had run their course, Job would send and sanctify them. And he would rise early in the morning and offer burnt offerings according to the number of them all. For Job said, "It may be that my children have sinned and cursed God in their hearts." This is what Job always did. Okay, what this represents is the idea that we're living young life, this little stuff that we're doing, the feast days. Feasting means we're consuming things. We are, spiritually, we are having experiences. Feasting, we are living life, the gusto of life. And those that had run their course, we are the male and the female. That's just us having the experience. The brothers and the sisters, yeah, this is us having early life experiences and making sure that they stay rectified. It's okay. Let's not move ahead with that kind of pain. Let's resolve this before we go on. That sort of thing. We are. Anyway, somehow that signifies that idea that little things are happening in the beginning, but it's okay. And then it moves on from there. But right in the beginning, we see how the calling happens. There's a man named Job who is upright. We'd have blameless in there too. What is, I don't remember. I'm not familiar with that word. Blameless shows up 10 times. So blameless also now means that same place. This is how they are continually creating analogs. You know why we can't see it? Because we don't have it memorized. It's right there. I'm only finding it because of what I'm doing here. And I finally hit on what they're doing. Then you start looking and go, yep, it's so consistent. There's no question. They're sticking with a system that they set up. And they're staying on that system. So let's solve the puzzle. From the book of Job, we have upright, and blameless to add. Because, remember, they both showed up 10 times. So now we add upright and blameless, and they will continue throughout the book of Job, and probably through other books of the Bible, remain analogous terms that represent the same pure state right here. Upright and blameless. That's how they're continuing to create them. You also see how I stray so much from what I'm... This is about the called person, and I'm showing analogs here. It's because they just hook up so much when you find stuff like that. It's like, you know what? Let's keep looking at this stuff. Oh my gosh, look at what's happening. So that's an exciting thing. Job called, and you can see the numbering system that the Jewish material is containing that has a deeper layering in there. It makes it sound like the story is a historical thing that's running along with dates and ages and things like that really don't line up. Sometimes they do. I mean, they're building it in the story is being constructed in their time using what they have in their region. The historical things will be there. That's when the stories are made. They have to be, of course. One more. Did the Romans maintain it? Yeah. I'm going to look at something in the New Testament. Luke. Luke is a monomyth. Jesus is called. Let's take a look at something. So in the book of Luke, there's a point where Jesus is 12 years old. 12. We'll look at our list in a minute. 12 is on there as well. 12, 3, 7, 40. There's a number of things that we're continuing to see. So he was 12 years old. They went up as usual for the festival. When the festival was ended and they started to return, the boy Jesus stayed behind in Jerusalem, but his parents were unaware of this. Assuming that he was in the group of travelers, they went a day's journey. Then they started to look for him among their relatives and friends. When they did not find him, they returned to Jerusalem to search for him. After 3 days, there's 3, they found him in the temple, sitting among the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions. And all who heard him were amazed at his understanding and his answers. So there we have somebody who is smarter than all the others at the age of 12. 12 is one of our pure analogs. So here we have something that demonstrates the idea of wisdom in purity above the knowledge of the church or the temple or life. Okay, we interpret these in the psyche. All of these are analogous to us. The temple is here. The wise men that are astounded are the old qualities, the old self that are like, yeah, I know what's going on. And then a new part of you comes in that's like, you know what? You used to, but not anymore. So this represents the idea that our new self is starting to take over, like where in Tiamat in the Babylonian works was freaked out. They were not okay that Marduk was ready to come. Now we've got a little bit different way where the wise people that are there are astounded at this. But it all represents the idea that there are parts of you that are either hard to fight or that, that are astounded by other things. All of that are stories that are maintained on the template this way. We'll keep going. When its parents saw him, they were okay. Yeah, that goes on there. Now, how old was he when he starts his, let's see, 30, which shows up one time, says what? And it's one of our analogs, remember? Jesus was about 30 years old when he began his work. So, and what do we see here? 40. It shows up one time. Where for 40 days he was tested by the devil, led by the Spirit in the wilderness. He's 40 days in the desert, in the wilderness, where the Israelites were 40 years in the desert. So we're seeing the continual, common, repetitive numbering pattern system in there. At the same time, we're seeing how they are maintaining how a called person is there. In Jesus' case, he was 30 when he was called. Oh, let me pull that list up one more time. Let's take a look at that. Yeah, what do we have here? Okay, so there's our 12. He was 12 years old when he was talking to the wise men. So that pulls from the pier right here. They looked for him for 3 days, so that pulls from right here as well. And he spent 40 days in the desert. Let's pick around with this a little bit more. Okay, so the 12 is in there, and that did work out with one of it. That was one of our analogs established early on. 12 is one of those really repeated numbers, and we can see why. But we see here, not only does 12 appear in here, but it appears 12 times. Every time it appears, it's going to confirm that. Now, if I keep playing around with this, I'm going to start looking at a variety of other things in here just because I've learned to kind of look at things and pick at them and go, this sounds weird. What is that right there? If I read through here, oh, you know what? Here's one thing I want to do. But they had no children because Elizabeth was barren and both were getting on in years. Barren, let's see. Barren represents an empty psyche. You don't have offspring. That is good. And look, barren comes up 3 times exactly. Oh yeah, barren's a good thing. You see how that just keeps revealing as you keep picking at it like that? All right, I'm going to drop Luke and go all the way back to Genesis and try something here. Just watch this. Barren. 3 times in Genesis. Those are all good counts. Yeah, barren began right back there. All the way down into Luke, they're still maintaining it. It'll be in other places. It might show up 7 or 12 or 60 times in other places, but it'll be showing up with certain numbers. And I'm going to end the video. I don't want to keep going and make this longer. But that's the network thing that just keeps popping up. You're like, whoa, wow, I see what those words mean. They're giving number meanings, and when you can distill it down, it's this cyclical pattern of going in and healing over and over again that they've got going on. And it's hidden. Boy, is it hidden. If anything that I'm doing looks kind of cool, that's barely the tip of the iceberg. We're not even into it. This is just starting. All right. Hope the video was fun and interesting. It was for me. I got to keep working in, honestly, with Abrahamic material because that's where all these numbers are really big, and there's things going on in there I don't have figured out yet. The other stuff, it seems pretty straightforward. They're not nesting it in that way. They are hiding it in their own analogs, though. The Bhagavad Gita, I'll go ahead and read parts of it, but there's some of it I don't want to start learning what the gods are and different things and terminology. It becomes pretty, you got to focus on somewhere. And right now my focus is, in Abrahamic material. But I will take a break like this to continue to show examples of things. I'm going to close with a fun comparison. I run into these all the time. What I'm going to do is I'm going to read something from the Bhagavad Gita, just a short piece, and then something from the book of Matthew, just a short piece. This is called, in Matthew, it's called the narrow gate. This is the narrow gate, entering in to your own mind. Enter through the narrow gate, for the gate is wide, and the road is easy that leads to destruction, and there are many who take it. For the gate is narrow, and the road is hard that leads to life, and there are few who find it. This is from chapter 2, Self-Realization. We're following a path. Those who follow this path, resolving deep within themselves to seek me alone, attain singleness of purpose. For those who lack resolution, the decisions of life are many-branched and endless. See you in the next video.